All right. So the topic for today is the usage of parameterized value sets and questionnaires, and to just to go back to that discussion on using translation, Brian and Nikolai, that yes, that's definitely possible. And there's actually a slide in this slide deck that preempts a bit of that. But let's get into it. So this parameterized value sets is a fairly new concept that involves terminology, obviously, and it takes the questionnaire terminology interaction to the next level, making it smarter and more scalable. Just gonna introduce myself for a bit. So I'm a software engineer from the AEHRC, Australian eHealth Research Centre, which is the digital health program at CSIRO, Australia's National Science Agency. I'm from the Health Data Semantics and Interoperability group, led by Michael Lawley, and he's the guy you would usually correlate with on the server. Now, the group is currently also heavily invested in Australia's FHIR Accelerator program, Spark. The people involved there are currently doing an awesome job of building an ongoing community to accelerate the adoption of health interoperability standards here in Australia. As for myself, I mainly work on web technologies, focus on SDC and clinical integration, so Smart on Fire, which I'm gonna talk about next. Now, this is us. Very nice photo of the AEHRC. I believe this was taken in our 2024 annual colloquium, where all the bright minds in the organization would showcase their incredible research. Okay, just to provide a bit of background on what I do or what I have done previously, or still ongoing actually. Smartphones and the Cyro renderer is what we have developed. It's an open source web-based FHIR-powered forms application. It integrates with EHR via Smart on Fire for data exchange. The primary use case is for practitioners to conduct health assessments digitally in a seamless and secure manner. So the target questionnaire that we built this product on is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Check. It's a super comprehensive assessment for Australian First Nations people. It's initially a paper form, and now it's digitized into a FHIR questionnaire because we want to digitize it in a standards-based manner. Now, just a bit more zooming in here. Here's a clearer view of the 715 form being rendered. I want to provide a distinction between the two components here, which they serve different roles. Notice the blue and the orange bounding boxes around the app and the renderer, respectively. Now, the app interacts with the EHR and facilitate data exchange. So, say FHIR calls for pre-pop and write back. It also provides interactions like saving the form, previewing it, repopulation, and so on. It also decides which questionnaire to render. Now, if we talk about the renderer, it contains the rendering logic, and it also performs the SDC logic processing, such as variables, evaluating enable when expressions, enable when calculated expressions, and so on. It also allows the user to interact with the form itself. And at the end of the form filling stage, it outputs a filled questionnaire response. Now, the idea of separating these two components is it allows decoupling. So it enables you to use the renderer component in other applications as a plug and play module, such as Brian's FHIR Lab. The cool thing is that Brian's FHIR Lab app is a Vue.js app, and this is a React-based component. So we actually found a library to kind of connect these two components from different frameworks. So that's actually pretty cool. Okay, now going into the real topic, which is parameterized value sets. I'm just going to give you a very, very simple example here. The background is a common use case in forms is to make one question's options depend on the answer to another question. So for example, a simple one is show the states/territories relevant to the selected country. So if I click on Australia, It gives me the Australian states. If I click on Canada, it gives me the Canadian states, US, the US states, and so on. Sorry, Canadian provinces and territories, not states. They don't have states there. Uh, Now, for the sake of contrast, I also throw in Antarctica, which is not a country and therefore doesn't have any states. Now, if you're thinking about doing this in code, in JavaScript, it doesn't seem too hard to do this, right? It looks like it can be done with just a bunch of if-else statements. If Antarctica, give me an empty array. If Australia, give me um, the Australian states, and so on. But surprisingly, it is very difficult or complex to build this in a questionnaire. You would have to do something like this in a CQF expression in the answer value set field. So I'm just going to break this down. Bear with me here. Here's what it translates to. Now, if the country is Australia, give me the Australian states value set. Otherwise, if the country is the US, give me the US states value set. Otherwise, if the country is Canada, give me the Canadian provinces and territories value set. Otherwise, give me the value set containing all states, provinces, and territories. Uh, it is pretty ugly considering you can't do line breaks in a JSON string. And it roughly translates to this in code in JavaScript, which is a bit more readable, but still it's not scalable. So you kind of need three value sets at the minimum. So in this case, we have AU, US, CA. If you want to have a value set that contains all the states, you would need to have four. This is just not scalable because we have so many countries in the world, and you can't have like 200 value sets just for this one use case. Now, the solution is a dynamic value set expansion based on a generic p-value filter search parameter. That's a mouthful, but essentially what it means is you only need one value set which contains all the states, and then you use a search parameter to filter them. Now, this was first proposed by Michael Lawley with inputs from Brian and Graham. Here's the link to the original proposal, and there's also a link to the draft spec page. Okay, I have created a working example on the R4 onto server sandbox for this countries/state scenario. In this example, we have a value set that contains all states and provinces from the three countries. So it'll be this one. Then, if we want to do the filtering, we can add a p country search parameter to filter the states down to a single country. So it'll be this portion. So that's a search parameter. Now, if you look at the last row of the table, which is this, it gives you a US states example. In this case, the P country code or value would be US. I think now's a great opportunity to try this out in Postman yourself. The available options here are AU, CA, US. So I might just drop this link in the chat and give everyone 1 minute to do that. Not sure how I can copy this. Nope. Just gonna come back here and drop this in the chat. Now, if everyone can just copy this link, put it in their browser or put it in Postman, you'll be able to see the filtered states and territories that belongs to the US. And if you change the country code to AU, you would be able to filter it to see the Australian states. Okay. Might just wait 10 more seconds for everyone to do that. Is everyone getting the expected result? Hopefully. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, now it broke with PT. Yeah, because the only available codes that I have included in this demo is AU, CA, and US, so it doesn't work for everything. You kind of need to build a value set and a code system that includes everything if you want to include everything. But this is just a demo. So yeah, cool. That's great. Okay. Now in my example, I'll set the P country value to AU, and it's going to give me an expansion containing all the Australian states here. Notice in this states example, there will be clashes between states with the same codes. So, for example, the Northern Territory in Australia has NT, which clashes with Canada's Northwest Territories, which is also NT. So we kind of need to work around this issue by appending the country code behind it. And this is really not a questionnaire thing. This is really up to the terminology, uh, I guess, developer to develop their code systems and value sets to ensure everything works fine. There's also another clash here with WA. So we have Western Australia, and it clashes with Washington State in the US. Okay, now the other thing which leads back to Nikolai's question is, how does the expand operation performs filtering based on the p-value? Now, this information is actually stored in the code system, not the value set. So if you look at this example here, this is a snippet from the concepts in the code system. And we have four examples here. So we have code AL, Alabama, and then in each concept, there's actually a property which provides the filter, I guess, provides the filter context. So in this case, it'll be country, and the code will be US. That's how the expand operation knows that if you add P, if you add a search parameter P country equals to US, it will only grab the concepts. This one, it'll grab this one, it'll look at this, and that's AU, that's not US. So we'll just throw this away and then resume going through that entire set and then returning you the filtered results. And an interesting thing to point out is a concept can have multiple p-value filters. So that means that you can have multiple filtering properties here. The code system might get a bit more complex, but it really depends on the use case if you want to have multiple p-value filters. Just moving on. Okay, so now the interesting part, usage in questionnaires. How do we use this in questionnaires? Uh, we can apply the p-value filter in answer value set using a new extension called this. And in short, it's called a binding parameter. And at the moment, I think it only works on expand and validate code calls. Now, it's designed to be generic, so it works on other expand and validate code parameters as well. For example, count, for example, active only, I believe that's from the expand operation. And then this display language, which Nikolai and Brian talked about just now in their discussion. How do we perform translation? So I imagine, I'm not a terminology expert, but I imagine you can have display language equals to Spanish, Espanol, so ES. I'm not sure how that works, but hopefully that's how it works. It should be a pretty simple syntax. But basically, you can provide the search parameter display language there and have it assign uh, the language value, the language code. Okay, so here's an example on how it can be used. This is an answer value set field in a questionnaire item. So the blue bounding box gives you the value set URL. So that's pretty standard. That's just the URL to expand. The orange one is what's new. You would assign the a binding parameter with p country. So that's like the search parameter name. And then you would have an which is a five-part expression where you can define the value. So in this case, we would have uh, resource.item.where link ID country code. So that means there will be another item above this questionnaire, or sorry, above this item or within the questionnaire called country code, and then it will produce an answer of either AU, CA, or US. That's how the P country can be assigned to that code that you've just selected. So when the renderer detects a change in this file path expression, it will hit the terminology server with the new expand request, therefore updating the state dropdown options. So here's a demo. Um, just gonna click on this. Don't blink because I think it'll be pretty quick. Oh, before that, just some introduction here. Uh, there are two radio button items here, one for countries, one for states. And personally, I think it makes more sense to do this as a dropdown for user experience and also to render the state item conditionally with enable when, because now you end up with all the states. And uh, I don't think there's a use case where you might have all the states, where you want to see all the states in the world. But for the sake of visualization, let's proceed with this. Click on this one, then just watch it. Now, when it clicks on Antarctica, there are still options available. Australia, it gives you the Australian states. Canada, it gives you the Canadian provinces and territories. And the US, it gives you um, all the states in the US. And if you clear it, it reverts back to that full list, that mixture of all states and all countries. So that's it. That's the demo. And at the end of the presentation, there will be resources in how to replicate this demo. So stay tuned. Moving on. There's actually another demo I lied to you. Now this one is interesting as well. This is a demo app I've built to demonstrate how a questionnaire renderer can be used in a different way. In this case, to visualize a value set. Instead of you defining the questionnaire, the app would generate the questionnaire for you based on some terminology inputs. So I think the terminology people is going to love this one. If people are interested in viewing this on their devices, feel free to use the link or the QR code. I've personally tested it on mobile Safari, and I think it's a bit clunky there. I'm not sure. So I'll recommend using a computer instead. I'm going to give you a live demo on that but before that, just let me go through this slide real quick. Just want to explain how these inputs map to a questionnaire. So when we look at this terminology server URL, it maps to what we call the preferred terminology server extension in a questionnaire. So it basically tells the renderer, please use this terminology server to do any terminology related stuff. The next field in here is the value set URL. So that goes into questionnaire.answer value set. Once that's done, click on this button, um, and the renderer would create an item. Sorry, the app would create a questionnaire containing a single item. And it'll either be a dropdown or an autocomplete based on whether the value set expansion from your URL has more than 150,000 entries or less than 150,000 entries. Because obviously, if you have a dropdown of more than 150,000 entries, I guess performance is not going to be great. So in that case, you would use an autocomplete anyway. It also includes support for parameterized value sets, which is our focus for the live demo. Okay, there we go. Gonna quit this one and switch to the browser. Hopefully this is still sharing. Is it still sharing? Can someone let me know?
Yes.
I can't see. Okay, cool. That's great. Um, yep. So this is a live demo. Terminology server URL, we're using R4 in this case. It's the sandbox server. It's publicly accessible, so we'll just use it. And the other thing I forgot to mention, parameterized value set, the implementation of it in onto server is still in its beta phase, I think. So I think it's only available on R4 for now. It's not available on TX or other onto server licenses. I might be wrong, but that's just the information I have since a few months ago. Okay, value set URL. We're gonna use this one, which was provided by default to us. Once that's in, click on this. It's now the renderer is going to render that item. So it's pretty cool. It's a drop down, and you can pick something in here. So this is really a visualization of a value set URL. Actually, let's try a second one. I might try this one. This is more interesting. Put it in here. Click on it. Now this is an autocomplete. So you got to type in something to do a search. I might do outpatient as an observation code. So outpatient, there we go. There's a bunch of results here. So that's cool. That's um, querying onto server for the codes. And now let's do the most interesting one, which is the parameterized value set. Hopefully this works. Cool. Now instead of one item, it's gonna give me two items. Um, the first item is the P country search parameter, and it gives me these three options, which is what we had just now, US, AU, CA. And then if I don't select a country here, it's gonna give me all the states here. So Alabama, US state, ACT, Australian Capital Territory, Australian state, British Columbia. So we have the mixture of all three here. And just gonna select this. Now it filters down to just the US states. Click on AU, filters it down to just the Australian states, CA, can Canadian provinces and territories. Cool. So that's pretty much the same demo I've shown you. It's just in a different app. And you might be wondering, how does this app know to generate two items instead of just one item? So there's a sequence there. And I have my notes ready, just in case I miss any. So firstly, it's going to look at the value set. And within that value set, there's actually a reference to the code system that the value set pulls its expansion from. So the app hits that code system. It looks through all the concepts in that code system and aggregates their properties. So that means that it does a for loop which looks through all the concepts and then identifies the properties. Say that, oh, this one has US, and then the next one has US as well. So US is obviously one of the properties. It goes through all of them and it finds US, AU, CA. Now that the app has this information, it turns these three properties into answer option values, which you can actually see here. So this is the questionnaire definition generated by the app, and this is what's being generated. The app pulls back the three concepts from the code system and maps it to this answer option, um, generating value string equals to US and so on. And now if you want to have a look at the live item of how P country is being used, this is exactly what we had in our previous slide. Answer value set, we got that URL here, and then we apply a binding parameter of P country, and then we have a FHIR path expression here, which gets its value from these three codes. So that's how parameterized value sets work in questionnaires. It's pretty cool, isn't it? Back to the PowerPoint.
Yes, it's very cool.
Thanks. No, that's cool. Michael Lawley, Brian, and Graham came up with it, and I think it's the coolest thing ever. Okay, there's some resources here. Now that we're almost at the end of our topic, we have the Smart Forms plus renderer here, which is on GitHub. That's open source. If you want to use the renderer in your app, it's available as an NPM package. Uh, so the first demo I've shown, parameterized value set, using a questionnaire. So you can actually grab this questionnaire. It's a JSON. Go to this link, which is the playground for the renderer. Plug that JSON into the playground, and you would be able to replicate that first demo I've shown. Now, this value set search demo app is also online. Click on it, use it however you want. Put it some other value set URLs not in the suggestions. Play with it if you want. And it's also open source, so you can see how the code looks behind the scenes. How the code, sorry, I worded that wrong. How it looks behind the scenes. Yeah, how the code looks behind the scenes. Um, I think that's it. Any questions? So, oh, by the way, this is my email. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, go to chat.fire.org. There's a questionnaire channel there, which Brian and Lloyd showed already, I think. Um, Feel free to ask your questions there so you can get the input from the whole community. That's it. Any questions? I think there are a lot in the chat.
Thank you. This is Nikolai and Brian. We're discussing the SNOMED. Can you guys give a bit more context? Brian, maybe you could elaborate on this, on the example with SNOMED.
Like there was nothing specific about SNOMED from that perspective. So it's just a capacity for the whole point was to provide a way with parameters to be able to filter content. So you don't have to have anything in the code system. It's purely a value set thing. So querying back into properties on concepts in the code system is really what it's all about. And so as long as you can represent it and the interaction with the questionnaire through that new extension really gives you not just access to this new parameterized value sets, but any parameters that contribute to the value set expansion, which I really like too.
We also have a question from an anonymous attendee. Does it do this code system aggregation lookup at runtime? How does this affect performance with larger value sets?
Okay. Sorry, Brian, you want to go?
Yours. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Um, so in the renderer itself, it's actually just doing an expand on the value set. That code system lookup is, I guess it's really just a functionality within that demo app that I've just shown, that it goes back to the code system to grab all the concepts, grab all the properties, and creates a new item. So that's not part of the renderer. What the renderer does is that you provided a value set URL, you provided a search parameter, and then whenever the value of that search parameter changes, um, what what the Cyro renderer does is that it has some caching mechanism. So if you feed it URL and uh, search parameter with a new value, it's gonna hit the terminology server at runtime, but then it caches the results. So the next time you're hitting the same constructed URL, it's just going to get it from the local cache. But yes, if it's a new URL, it's going to hit the terminology server in real time. So it really depends, and it kind of need to ensure that your terminology server can provide that response quickly in runtime. Now, the other thing is before I move on from this question, if we come back to this demo, you might see that when I select a country, you would see that this sync icon appears. So what I would imagine if your terminology server is slow is that when you select a new country here, for example, if I select Australia, if the terminology server is slow, let's say it takes 5 seconds to give you back the expansion for Australian states, I think it's gonna I think the state options here are gonna remain as the options that we had for Antarctica. So the options are not gonna load. And then having this sync icon kind of informs the user that uh, something is still going on. So the user has to wait for that sync to disappear before moving on with their form filling operation in the form. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think the
One
other
more quick.
part that's just to follow on from that, it also depends which control type you're linking to. So if you're linking to radios like this, that's an issue. But if you're linking to autocomplete, which is what you've got large sets, then it's not going to hit that until you actually go and query it. And I think that follows on to the next question of real world use cases with the clinical content. One of the other areas which is really common is where you've got a really broad set of possible answers and you've got another question which has a category in it. So when you go and say, I want to have, I've got this issue I need to deal with, it's of this category, and then the next field will only give you a subset of the total space. So that's something I see quite often when you have multiple combos which are all linked together, restricting down the latter ones.
If
Thank
you have
you.
1 minute, I still curious how it's different from the filter, because I can do the same with the filter, or I'm wrong. Because, okay, so your questionnaire are calling expansion to prefill the select or something like this.
Yeah, so filter is the expand.
I can send the filter and I can change the filter. Why do I need parameterized value set for that if it's just a filter?
The filter property hits the description.
I mean filter
so
property, sorry. Filter property, yeah.
Yeah, so the filter search parameter in the $expand is using the descriptions, so not other properties in the value set or code system. So this binding and this capacity allows you to then filter down and say, well, we're not going on the filter text, we're going on this property in there needs to have this value.
But there is a filter property parameter in expansion, if I'm not wrong.
The $expand filter, that is the one that all of the auto-completes use.
Yeah,
and that only goes on description.
I'm calling like parameters, call it filter property put together, like one token, filter property camel case, and it looks like it filters by properties.
In the value set itself?
In value set expansion operation. I can.
Sorry.
I can send a link to that. So just go to value set expansion and look for filter property.
Yeah, so those are the properties that come back.
So
but that doesn't.
I could not filter by these properties. I can only.
That's correct.
Okay, got you.
So now you can.
Okay, but again, so instead of like putting this into value set, it's still possible potentially put it into operation expand. But this is a different topic. Okay, got you. We will talk later about this.
There is also filter in value set where you can do that, but if you use that without the parameterized part, it always filters it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, let's not turn it into the session.
No worries. We can chase up on that afterwards.
We can definitely do it, but my idea is to thank Sean for the talk.